Hello and welcome to Piece of Pod, a podcast brought to you by South Coast law firm Warner Goodman. I'm Sarah Whitemore. I'm an employment lawyer and senior partner in the firm with over 30 years of experience. In this podcast, I'll be having conversations with law firm partners, business owners, clients and other contacts of mine, and we'll be engaging in conversations about running businesses, career journeys, and how to excel in the world of work. So if that's of interest, why not grab yourself a cuppa, get yourself comfortable, and let's dive in. Today, I'm joined by my good friend and China chum, Nick Parker. I know Nick as an accountant. He's been in a number of accountancy practices, but all the same practice, I think. They evolved from one to another. So we'll explore that on our chat today. He's a China chum, which means that I met him in China, and we'll explore that as well. And he's a great traveller and sports person, so they're all on the list for discussion. So first of all, welcome to the podcast, Nick.
Thank you very much. It's lovely to be here.
If you've seen the podcast before, we always start with the career journey.
Right.
So what you thought you wanted to do when you left school, what you did do when you left school. So it may be a little while back, but...
Yes, I can cast my mind back, though.
What were your ambitions as a young chap?
Well, I mean, it's quite interesting because when I'd done my O-levels, which went quite well, so that was okay, I remember talking to my dad, or my dad saying to me, what do you actually want to do? And of course, in those times, you had to have almost like a career plan, didn't you? It's not like nowadays where people go to finish school or go to university and have no idea what they want to do, which is fantastic. There, it was very much, you did this, you went and did a career, etc. So my dad said, you like money, so I suggest you do something involving money. And at that time, I had two images with regard to money. One was banking, which was sitting behind a till, dishing out money at a counter. And the other one was accountancy, which I didn't really know much about, but it sounded really quite sexy and exciting. So I thought, right, let's do chartered accountancy. So that's what I said I'd do.
So did you go to university or did you learn on the job?
No, yeah. I left school with appalling A-levels. I mean, that was just a disaster, my A-levels. I picked completely the wrong subjects. I'd picked geography because my brother had done it. I'd picked history because my dad taught it. And then I did economics and I failed history, but I passed geography and economics, which allowed me to get articles for chartered accountancy. So I went and worked for a local firm in Slough.
And so like you say, back in the day, It was you go to university now or never, or you go out to work. But
that was it.
There wasn't any of this chopping and changing and routes and so on. Interesting you say about banking or accountancy. Banking or law was my options when I was going to go to university. My parents were academics, academics. They insisted that we would go to university and that was the end of that. And so in those days you had a handbook, an UCA handbook with every single course in every single university. Yep. And I remember flicking through thinking, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? I know I want to do something that's got a job at the end of it. And for me, that was banking or law. I had no idea about what, but I thought banking was just giving the cash out.
Exactly, sitting at a till, dishing out cash.
Not what these high city financiers do or whatever.
No,
it was
not
just
at all.
the woman you see over the counter.
That was the image that you had.
And that didn't appeal to me. So
No, neither me. So that hence the reason why I went into accountancy.
So you started at a local firm in Slough?
Yep.
And was there a sort of structured training plan, or how did that work?
Well, yeah, because it was chartered accountancy, you have to. I think at that time it was a foundation. First of all, you did a foundation course, which I did at Ealing Technical College.
Okay.
And then you did part 1 and part 2, which were your professional exams, where you go away to, I can't remember where we used to go away to, but you do the sort of a block of 6 weeks and then take your exam and hopefully pass. Unfortunately, having mucked up my A-levels and not done very well, as soon as I got into accountancy, it was all absolutely fine. I went, sailed through my exams, etc., and qualified after about 4 years.
And so found your niche then. And I think you went into this tax side of accounting.
Yeah, because I always loved the law side, funnily enough. And when I qualified as an accountant, I then thought about also studying to be a lawyer. But by then I was married, had our first son, and therefore it wasn't really a good idea to suddenly go from earning what would have been a decent salary back into the training regime. So I just continued on in accountancy, but I then stuck to tax, which of course involves a lot of law.
Right. And so in terms of career path, I know you as being Weeks Green, BKL, Tenon, RSM, all the same business really, but a number of different practices. Was Weeks Green the first, or was the
No. I was with Uri & Co, which is who I trained with in Slough. And then when I qualified as a chartered accountant, I then moved to Touche Ross, who are now Deloitte. And I specialised in tax with them I think I was with them for 4 years. And I was sort of on the route to becoming a partner, but not a partner in London. It would have been in fact, I was offered a partnership up in Scotland somewhere.
Okay.
But I didn't really, the family didn't really fancy moving up to Scotland. So I then left and moved to Weeks Green in Southampton.
And so quite a long progression of lots of different firms, but all one and the same. But what sort of difference did you notice amongst the different businesses that you worked with?
That was quite interesting because Weeks Green was quite an established firm, had been around for a long time. And I remember at the time I joined, Barry Gay was the senior partner, but he was very keen on the younger partners actually talking and moulding how the firm should be, and how we should proceed. And I remember I was the one that insisted that we got a fax machine. I mean, can you believe? It sounds so antiquated now.
We were just talking actually last week as to whether we have a fax machine still in the firm.
Well, yeah, I don't know whether anybody does now.
Probably in a cupboard, I should think.
Yeah, absolutely. But we had to get a fax machine, so we got that, and then I was the one that introduced budget day lectures. I used to go around all the offices doing that, and I also used to do a budget handout. So literally, that was an interesting time because in those days there were no leaks about budgets or what was going to be in the budget, so it was all quite exciting. We used to send bike riders up to Somerset House to collect the press releases as soon as the Chancellor sat down, and then they'd bring them back, and then I used to work literally through the night with a secretary producing the budget synopsis for the following morning's presentation.
Whereas I guess these days we are bombarded with updates from all sorts of accountants when budgets happen, and I guess they're prepared in advance because they've been told.
Exactly. We know basically what the Chancellor's going to say before they actually get up and say it, which it's sort of taken a bit of the excitement out of budget days, I think.
Yeah. Now, I'm an employment lawyer, as you know, and I'm an employment lawyer because I like the fact that things change.
Yes.
I like the fact that I'm not playing the same game today that I was 6 months ago, and that's the buzz for me. Is that a bit like that with budget day? Did you used to like the changes that, and this is now a different way
And that's
of doing
to some
things?
extent why I like tax. It's exactly the same as employment law because things are always changing. You're having court cases, you've got budgets, etc., etc. And it's because things change so much that I actually enjoyed it rather than, auditing is okay, but it doesn't change so much. Mm-hmm. And I just like the excitement of solving problems, i.e. someone giving you a transaction and saying, how can we do this in the most tax efficient way, which is absolutely fine, or, how do I get out of this problem that I found myself in?
Yeah, absolutely. That definitely resonates with me. And I have to ask, favourite Chancellor? Have you had a favourite Chancellor over the years? Favourite budget even?
Oh dear, no. Well, I don't think the current Chancellor's doing desperately well, I have to say, despite sort of it being quite exciting when she came in. I'm not sure she's got it quite right. I'm just trying to think. God, no, I can't think of a favourite Chancellor or a favourite budget.
You're similar to me. You're at this end of your career, if you like.
Yeah, absolutely.
We've had a long time in our respective professions. When you look back over the time that you've been an accountant, how have you seen the profession change?
It's definitely become far more specialised, as I should imagine law has as well. I mean, when I went into tax, and I'm not sure you could do this now, I specifically went to Touche Ross because you could do all the taxes. Whereas now you are very much, you will do private client, or you will do corporate tax, or in some cases you'll just do capital allowances,
Right.
which is terribly, terribly niche. And I wouldn't have enjoyed that. And also in the area that I concentrated on, which was very much the sort of owner family business type thing. You know, when you went and saw a proprietor of an owner family business, they would ask, okay, you go and talk them about the business, but then they'd say, oh, I've got what about this that I've bought my personal tax, or my wife's buying this, or whatever. And they don't expect you to then have to bring in loads of other experts to answer the question. They expect you to have an all-round knowledge. Okay, you may not be an actual expert in that tax, but you've got an overall knowledge, and that's what I enjoyed about doing all the taxes.
And I think we do a lot with SMEs and as you say, owner-managed business, family businesses.
Yes.
And there are, particularly the family ones, are a special breed, I think, aren't they? Because you've got the family dynamics as well as the business and the strategy. And I think when you develop a relationship with a client like that, you can really get involved with all sorts of different things. And that, again, brings the world of work alive, doesn't it?
Well, I've always said that the aim of a professional, I think, or of an accountant particularly, is to be the fourth emergency service.
Right.
You know, you've got the police, you've got the ambulance, etc. But basically, you should be the person that if there's a problem within the family, they think they will pick up the phone to you as their advisor, and you'll help them out.
Yes, that sort of concept of trusted advisor, isn't it? That they might call you and say, got a problem with my horse, and you think, well, I'm an accountant, why are you calling me? But they've got you into that position where, who am I going to ask? I'll ask Nick.
And often, to some extent, you know almost more about the family than some of them do. You know, because you've seen, I mean, I've acted for families where I've known 3 or 4 generations. And so you sort of know all the history, you know all the transactions, you know what's happened. And that's the interesting bit about it. You've become so trusted within the family, which is really nice.
Yeah, and we have a similar sort of sense with some of our clients. So obviously we have our Peace of Mind subscription service, and some of our clients have been with us for 15, 16, whatever, 20 years.
Yeah.
And we've had more longevity with that business than, for example, the HR manager. We've had a cycle, and sometimes they like to remain with us because we are the consistency piece, and
absolutely.
We know what happened the last time they went round the block with this issue or whatever it might be.
Yeah,
so,
you've got the memory.
Exactly that. So how do you think the future is looking for sort of budding accountants who are starting out now?
Well, I still think it's a great profession to go into, particularly, you know, men and women. I mean, it's adapted so much since COVID, hasn't it, with working from home and all this, etc. So I think it's a great profession to go into. I don't think you necessarily have to be a genius at maths to be an accountant.
Right.
I certainly didn't do maths A-level or anything like that. I've always had an aptitude for maths, and I understand patterns, etc. But I'm certainly not a maths wizard. And what I would say, I mean, you know, first of all, you don't have to go to university to be a chartered accountant.
Nor a lawyer these days. No.
Exactly. Yeah. And so, you know, go to university if you want to go to university, if you want the university experience. But if you're not really after that, then don't. Go to an accountancy firm and be, study to be an accountant with just your A-levels. So that I'd definitely say that. And also with regard to university, don't necessarily think you have to do an accountancy degree to be an accountant.
No.
To some extent, I think it's a bit of a waste. You know, if you're going to university and you're going for the experience, which I think you should go for, then go and study a subject that really appeals to you, really interests you. Because it doesn't matter, you'll still, if you get a good degree, you'll still be hired for an accountancy qualification.
I say that too in terms of the law. A law degree is not necessarily what we're looking for when we're recruiting, but an excellent degree is what we're looking for. And
Precisely.
if you've done history and you have a passion for history and you come out with a high grade in history, that's better than a low grade in law because you had to deal with all these different topics that you weren't really interested in.
Yeah, I totally
and
agree.
wouldn't be relevant.
Totally agree.
Now, you've spent time as well during your career as a mentor for school pupils, I think. Can you share with us how that went, what your experience was like there?
Yeah, well, it sort of started because at Week Screen, being one of the younger partners, you know, you get invited to go out to schools to talk to the kids about accountancy and trying to encourage them to be an accountant if that's something that they'd like to do. or sort of doing lectures, because I got involved with the local Southern Society of Chartered Accountants as well. I mean, that came about because the senior partner said, we've always had a tradition of Weeks Green having one of the partners involved with the local Southern Society. You're the youngest partner, off you go. And that sort of took me down a number of roads and ultimately got me the position of being president of the Institute, which was fantastic. But so I was used to going out and sort of I used to do tax lectures and stuff like this. And so I was sent out to schools to encourage people to just tell them what accountancy was like, what was involved, because people have an image of accountancy. They have an image of what a lawyer is, and it's so far from... banker. Or a banker. And it's so far from what actual reality is, and it's just trying to sort of put a bit of colour to what the image is.
And did you gain something from mentoring them as much as you were giving?
Yeah, I did. And in later life, when I was sort of president of the Institute, I used to go out and there was a mentoring program trying to encourage youngsters who were actually studying accountancy, who want to be mentored about how to further their career. And so I got involved with that, with sort of inner city kids. So that was interesting as well. Yeah, you do get an awful lot. And it also keeps you up to date.
Oh, absolutely. And I think one of the kind of life-affirming things I find, having been at Warner Goodman for 30-odd years, I love seeing people progress through their career. I love that, you've had a conversation and now maybe somebody's maybe they're a partner alongside you, but, you've seen them progress. It's definitely something that's life-affirming, as I say. Yeah,
there's a real buzz. I totally agree. I mean, there's a couple of guys there was a guy who was a friend of the guy that looks after, does sort of building work for us. And he was working in Waitrose, and he'd always wanted to be, he was on their management scheme, but actually wanted to be an accountant. And I remember his dad talking to me about, were there any jobs going? And so I spoke to the office, and he ultimately came and worked at RSM, and he went straight through his exams. He's qualified, and now, which was fantastic. And then another friend of ours, my goddaughter, her now husband, they were at college together. He did a catering qualification or something, just because that's what he went off and did. He didn't particularly want to do it, was again interested in figures, money, accountancy. And so I got him a job at RSM, and he sailed through. So, you get enormous pride from seeing these guys come in and sort of study, work hard, and then just become great accountants.
Absolutely. Now, you've mentioned a couple of times the president, being the president.
Yes.
So what was that all about? And what did you get up to during your time as president?
Well, I mean, as I'd said before, I was sort of thrust into SOSCA, which is the Southern Society of Chartered Accountants. So after about 2 or 3 years, I became the president of SOSCA. And then each district society has a representative, or 1 or 2 representatives on the council of the Institute. And so Chris Laney, who was the then council member for SOSCA, he actually became national president. And so his place became vacant. And so I then became the council member for SOSCA. So I was on council for a number of years. Then I sort of became chair of council, which was another interesting experience, because actually chairing a meeting of 100 people takes a skill, and it's a skill that you learn. So whilst it was an interesting thing to do, you actually got something out of it because you learn that skill. So I did that for about 3 years, and then I was elected to become an officer of the National Institute. And after being deputy president and assistant president, or whatever it was, I can't remember, 2 years, I then became the national president. And my theme for the year, because we've got, I think at that time, there was over 100,000 chartered accountants or members of our particular accountancy organisation, but we were scattered all around the world. And so my theme for the year was actually getting out to meet members, because, I think it's important to actually go and talk to members to find out they pay £500, £600, £700 a year to be a member, they're generally proud of their qualification, but you need to find out from them that if there's anything that you should be doing, or what anything that we're doing well, etc., etc. And so I did that an awful lot, which included travelling around the world, going and meeting lots and lots of members. I went to Australia, New Zealand. We're very big in the Far East, so I went to Hong Kong about 4 times. Most bizarre thing was I actually flew to Hong Kong for a dinner.
Right.
Literally for a dinner.
Yeah,
I left London on the Friday afternoon, arrived in Hong Kong on the Saturday morning, went to the hotel, changed into a DJ, went to the dinner, and literally then went from the dinner back to the airport to get on a plane to come home. And
what a trip of a lifetime. Amazing. Just an amazing experience.
Absolutely. And again, meeting loads of members. It was fascinating because on every trip, they used to set up numerous meetings. So it was no holiday at all, but it was fascinating. And you'd go and meet all these different members, or indeed government ministers, or whatever, in whatever territory you were in. And then I used to come back with detailed notes of what I've been told and pass those to the relevant people in the institute, who used to then go off and do things about whatever might have been raised. So it was fascinating.
I've been looking for holidays, as you do, from time to time, and I come across a website that specialises in amazing day trips. And I was saying, when we were looking at it, one of my favourite memories of my time at Warner's was a day trip to Lake Annecy in France for lunch with Tenon.
Yes.
With Mike Lucas, was it?
Yeah, Mark Lucas.
Mark Lucas.
Yeah.
And as you say, picked up at 6 a.m.
Yeah.
Heathrow, fly out to Geneva, I think, and an amazing experience. And I don't know, you may have been on the trip, you may not have been. It was definitely a Tenon-hosted thing. But pre-Bribery Act.
Those were the days of great entertaining. Yeah. And you're absolutely right, because we wanted to make a difference, and because, another of the things, I always like to have challenges. To challenge myself, to sort of push myself forward, take me out of my comfort zone. And one of the challenges was to get my private pilot's license.
Oh, of course, yes.
Because Andrew Chalkley, who of course you know really well, was a great friend, and he had a private pilot's license, and so he used to take me flying, and we used to go on trips, etc. And he said, why don't you learn to fly? And at that time, married 2 young kids, I didn't really have the money to. So he said, I'm sure I'll sort something out to get your private pilot's license. And so he phoned me up one day and he said, I've sorted it. He said, I know a pilot who's got tax problems. So if you sort her tax problems out, she'll teach you to fly.
Oh, fab.
And that's how I got my private pilot's license. And because I had that, then we used to do sort of more interesting trips, pre-Bribery Act, of course, for entertaining. We used to fly people down to Newquay Airport and take them to Rick Stein's in Padstow.
Lovely.
Or we used to take them across to, it was the north coast of France. I can't remember whereabouts it was. But we also used to do day skiing trips,
right?
To flying into, where you would have flown into Geneva and then gone to Annecy. We used to go out to Flen and have a day's skiing and then fly back. Or another thing we used to do was fly to Geneva for the Geneva Motor Show.
Right, okay.
Which
and sport.
Which is no longer held in Geneva, bizarrely. But so we used to do
a responsibility flying clients.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. Not just me though. The lady who taught me to fly, she was the pilot. I was the co-pilot.
Well, Lake Annecy was British Airways, I think.
And when we did the Flen trips, that was British Airways. But our lunch trips, they used to be in a private plane.
Yeah, and as mentioned in the opening there, you're one of my China chums. So
that's right.
I like to say we first met in China, but actually, we probably first met in Reading at your offices there ahead of the trip. But basically, it's China that stuck with me rather than Reading. So that's why.
Funny.
The point of that trip was to bring a group of business people together to do strategic thinking on the Great Wall of China. What do you think you took most from that experience?
Well, as you say, the idea again came from Mark Lucas, who met a guy called Anthony Willoughby.
That's right.
It was Anthony Willoughby and the idea of it was to take business leaders away from their day routine, take them to somewhere where they would have never been before, perhaps a bit uncomfortable, challenging, and then get them on the basis of Chatham House rules to talk about their business openly with everybody else that was on, to share their experiences and perhaps learn what experience other people had with the problems that they may have been facing at the time. And the interesting thing, I don't know whether you thought it, but I always found, was that how you'd think that the problem that you had was the only possible, that it was just you, that nobody else was facing it, it was because of something that you weren't doing right. And generally you'd find that the problem you were facing, most of the other people around the table were facing it as well, and
a
had
very
come across
diverse
it.
group.
Oh,
of,
totally.
I would say diverse group of businesses. So we had contact lens manufacturer, fireplace importer, a telephone recycler, an accountant, a lawyer, whatever, 20 odd of us. But as you say, all had the same people issues, all had the same, whatever it was, business growth issues.
Because it was all about running a business, not necessarily running an accountancy practice, but just running a business. And, everyone has those problems.
And it challenged me from the point of view of, we will often say, lawyers don't do that. But these people were saying, well, why don't lawyers do that?
Yeah.
Your business is the same as we are. You should be doing that.
Yeah.
And it was an amazing trip. I have to say, in your description there, you mentioned get them a little bit uncomfortable. I don't remember that being on the flyer that invited us on the trip.
Well, no, quite. Well, we wouldn't necessarily say that.
I, somewhat naively, when I was asked if I wanted to go for a strategic thinking on the Great Wall of China, I had this notion, we were going to sleep on the Great Wall, but I had this notion there was a hotel on the Great Wall of China. So I remember getting off the coach, we walked up to the wall, and this is very nice, not been to this before, and thinking, where's this hotel that we're going to stay? And if you remember, and if people who've been to China will know, all the way along the wall, there are little sort of turrety things. And I thought, one of these will be converted into, there'll be bedrooms and whatever, wash facilities and so on. And gradually, as the day progressed, it dawned on me that there actually isn't anywhere here that we're going to be sleeping. And then we were produced roll mats and sleeping bags, and we were actually sleeping on the wall.
On the wall, absolutely.
Which was a huge surprise to me.
Yeah.
But an amazing experience. I mean, it was like a teenager's sort of sleepover, wasn't it?
It was extraordinary. And were you on the trip when there was the Chinese version of Elton John doing a video?
That's right.
Do you remember
yes.
that? I mean, that was the most bizarre experience, because we were walking along the wall, and then suddenly we came over the wall, and there was this white grand piano with a Chinese guy, the equivalent of Elton John, in a white tuxedo, etc., right, playing and being filmed. I mean, it was ridiculous.
It was amazing. And some of us, Nick, managed to fall off the wall.
Yes, I fell off the wall. Yes, because if you remember, one of your partners, Ms. Batty, had got us a load of champagne. So we'd actually went up to the wall to celebrate and see the sun going down. And one or two of us, including me, had perhaps a little too much champagne. And when it got very dark, forgot I was standing actually on a wall with steps, stepped backwards into absolutely nothing and fell down the steps. But fortunately, because I'd had so much, when I got back, RSM then insisted I went to a doctor just in case to have myself checked over. And he said, if I hadn't been so drunk,
you'd have fallen hard.
I would have fallen hard and damaged myself. But because I was very relaxed.
Instead of which, you spent the rest of the trip looking like we'd all abused you, because you had this horrendous bruise on your face, as I recall. And
exactly, black eyes and God knows what. But no, I mean, it was an amazing experience, yes.
Yeah, and has created sort of friends for life.
Oh,
I mean, it's
absolutely.
20 odd years ago we went to China, and we talk about the China chums, and we've all supported each other's businesses one way or another. And it's, you can't necessarily always do this in China, but it's a great example of how networking and so viewed in the long term actually works fantastically well.
Yeah, no, I agree. And we did exactly the same. Did you ever do Tanzania?
No, because my daughter broke her arm just before Tanzania, so she did Tanzania years later. I didn't break my arm, so she could go, but so I missed out on that one. But that was another experience.
Yeah,
wasn't
absolutely. It? Again, really out into the wilderness. I don't think we were even in at least in China we had a structure that we were in, weren't we? Whereas I think in Tanzania it was just tents.
And Maasai warriors.
Warriors, absolutely.
Sacrificed goats.
There were sacrificed goats. Yes. I wasn't desperately keen. Well, fortunately, we didn't have to watch that or anything. But yes, a goat was sacrificed to be then cooked over a log fire.
Yeah. So, you enjoy travel, you enjoy sport. Your love of horse racing has not escaped me.
No.
And I had conversations with a number of people before you came on to say, well, what am I going to ask Nick about? And one of them mentioned that you were there when Johnny Wilkinson scored the winning try. Are there lessons for business in the achievements that our sporting heroes have?
Oh, that's a good one. That is a good one. Yeah, I was lucky enough to go out to the World Cup. I only went out for the semi-final and the final of the World Cup in Sydney, because a mate of mine is Australian, and so we flew out. We managed to get flights out and went and stayed with his family, who happened to live in Sydney. So it was all really convenient. Clearly the pressure of sport and the pressure of business, they are very linked. I think, because you do have to adapt and. Clearly, that's what they do. So I think there are sort of similarities.
And I guess it takes a certain type of person that they have that kind of drive and ambition and the desire to achieve, and that's kind of one of the things that drives businesses forward, is having that goal and so on.
Yeah, well, it's a bit like Luke Littler, who I just think is extraordinary.
Yeah.
You've got this young guy who's 17, 18. But he is so, A, he's incredibly talented, but B, he just seems so focused and down to earth, and I just really admire the guy.
Yeah, and most of our audience are either HR managers or business owners, a lot of people from the SME market that we talked about earlier. Are there key things that you can draw from your experiences that they might benefit from, your knowledge of, or what are the things that they need to focus on?
Well, I think just from a career point of view, I think the thing your career doesn't come to you. I think if you want something, you need to go and do it. You go and to challenge yourself. I've always liked challenging myself. I had this big thing that I was the second son. My dad was a headmaster. My brother, who was a teacher, because I come from a family of teachers, he was a teacher, then became a headmaster. He was very sporty, so I wasn't particularly bright at school. I wasn't particularly good at sport, and so I had this sort of second son type syndrome. And so I've always felt that I almost had to prove something to my dad.
Right.
It is completely irrational and bizarre, but I had this thing. So hence the reason why I set myself challenges, like I trekked to the base camp of Everest. I tried to, funnily enough, with Mark Lucas, to climb Mount Aconcagua in South America, which is the highest trekking peak that you can. I took part in the BT Global Challenge Yacht Race.
Oh, right.
I did my private pilot's license, things to challenge me, take me out of my comfort zone, a bit like the Tanzania and the China trips, get you out of your comfort zone to actually see, you discover things about yourself, don't you? And you find perhaps you're stronger than you actually thought you were.
Yeah, absolutely. And was Dad impressed by any of those things, or any particular ones?
No, I think he was. He was always... Funny enough, talking to my brother now, because my dad's died, he always felt that I was the favoured son,
right,
rather than him, and I always thought he was the favoured son. I think it was because my dad was sort of quite Victorian and didn't really necessarily show his emotions particularly, well, so you never quite knew. But and
that
also having your dad, who was your headmaster as well, that was slightly bizarre.
Absolutely. I guess the trick of a good parent is to make both your kids think they're the favourite.
Well, yeah.
Actually, he did the opposite, didn't he? He made them both think the other one was
Yes,
the favourite. So perhaps
yeah,
it's not the good parent at all.
Yeah, I'm not sure it was, he got it necessarily right, because we both thought that the other one was the favoured son.
Yeah. So it just made you both feel that you weren't valued in quite
almost
the right way.
Inadequate.
Inadequate, no. Not a good parenting tip, that's for sure.
But to some extent, yes, he was very proud. Because I was the first member of the family to divert out of teaching, sort of, and go into accountancy, and then to become a chartered accountant. He was very, very proud of that. He died before I became president of the institute, but he would have absolutely loved that.
Loved that as well.
Yeah.
And did your dad give you any sort of career advice or any business advice or any? I mean, he was a headmaster, so perhaps it wasn't his forte, but
absolutely hopeless. None at all. I mean that there was. We've talked about how I went into accountancy. In those days, career progression or career advice was, I went to a boys' grammar school, so it was not particularly great, especially if you weren't necessarily going to university. It was great if you were thinking of going to Oxbridge particularly, but if you were just going out literally into the world and wanting to do accountancy, there was very little careers advice, and my dad knew absolutely nothing about chartered accountancy, so no, it was very much learn as you go along.
Now, you also have two boys.
Yes.
And do they each think the other one's the favoured son?
I don't know. No, I certainly hope they don't. You occasionally get the sort of jibe, of course it's okay because Joss did this, or it's okay because Russell did this. But no, I hope not.
They've both done very well, very good career journeys. Have they had advice from Dad along the way, did you take the same
except
approach?
Neither of them wanted to come near accountancy, and I don't really know why. I mean, it's quite interesting the way you sort of get families where Dad's an accountant, and then the sons or daughters become accountants, and it sort of just continues on. Neither of mine wanted to become accountants, although bizarrely the eldest one could easily have been an accountant, but no, he chose to become an equine surgeon.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So he's an equine surgeon, and the younger one was involved in national hunt racing, but now he's a farmer.
Oh, okay. Yeah, interesting.
So completely
Life's
away
what you
from
make of it,
accountancy.
Yeah,
although they do come back to Dad when they've got tax problems.
Right, fair enough. Fair enough. As I say, I've spoken to friends and colleagues about what I should ask you, and one in particular mentioned that you've always really enjoyed work and working life. So what's the secret about being so satisfied with work?
I don't know. You are absolutely right, because I retired from practice as being a tax partner, but I just didn't feel that I wanted to retire, and so fortunately one of my clients, who the father of a very successful family, said, actually, I want somebody to come and run the family office for the various businesses that we've got. Would you come and do it? And so I sort of retired from practice, but now that's the job I do. And I absolutely love it, because every day is different. You never quite know. Okay, some days aren't great, but most days I just really enjoy what I'm doing. I'm involved again with a family business and all the intricacies of that, and it's not necessarily just tax, it's just legal things, whatever, and going out and finding solutions. I just absolutely love it.
And the same friend, who you might cross off your list of friends afterwards, mentioned that he's nudging 70.
Yes, this June.
And ask him if full retirement is a prospect that excites him.
It certainly doesn't excite me now. I can't think of anything worse, hence the reason why I work, because my wife always says to me, why are you working? Why don't you stop? You don't have to work. And the answer is no, I don't have to work, but I work because I really enjoy what I'm doing. And I've said to her, as soon as it becomes something that I don't enjoy doing, I will stop. But at the moment, I love what I do. As I say, You occasionally get the bad day, and it's not all wonderful, but most of the time I really enjoy what I do, and once I do that, I shall continue to do it.
What an inspiration. That sounds amazing. Similar friend asked, ask him what winds him up. I mean, surely you are the most tolerant man on the planet. There can't be anything that winds you up, is there?
I'm just trying to think which friend you've been talking to. What winds me up? Oh dear. Well, I'll tell you one. I mean, this is just an example. I was listening. I was driving yesterday and happened to be listening into the Jeremy Vine show.
Well, that winds you up to start with.
Well, it can wind me up. And there was this item on the thing about apparently young kids starting school, something like 40 or 50% of them aren't nappy trained when they start.
Yeah.
And so teachers now are having to change nappies for primary school kids. And I just find that just completely and utterly absurd.
Were they putting it down to COVID? Is it one of those sort of post-COVID
well,
things?
Sort of. I just put it down to lazy parenting, to be honest. I mean, as a parent, there are obligations, and I think there is a basic obligation that when your child goes to school, they are not in nappies. Yeah. And you've nappy trained kids, and it's not easy, but you just do it. Yeah. And I just find it just winds me up. That sort of thing winds me up, that I just don't think people are taking responsibility for having kids. There is a responsibility there, and you've got to take responsibility for it.
Do you think it's one of those kind of age things? I remember when my children
I'm sure it's age thing. Definitely an age thing.
My children were very small. I would get parenting advice from my parents and my husband's parents, and they weren't up with the times as to what was whether it was the right time to wean a child or how you was. But they were complete, and I just think, oh God. And I fear that I'm now going to be that generation that does exactly the same. Oh well, in our day, and indeed I look at not on a parenting scale. I look at staff members and think, well, when I was a trainee solicitor, and I think, you can't go around the office saying when I was a trainee solicitor, no more than a consultant can say when I was a junior doctor, which is terrible. But I think it is an age thing. I think you get to that point in life where you start going, well, that's ridiculous.
And of course, we didn't have so many self-help books. I mean, now there are so many self-help books, aren't there? And I feel sorry for sort of young mums, particularly with regard to breastfeeding, because there's so much pressure put on a young mum. You must breastfeed. Okay, breastfeed if you want to, but if you can't breastfeed, and there are various reasons, I mean, it sounds bizarre me talking about breastfeeding, but it just winds me up that there's so much pressure is put onto a young mum who's perhaps never had a child before, first time baby, so the pressure is there anyway. These babies come along and they're not perfect per the books, are they? Sometimes you're lucky and you get one that sleeps, other times you don't get one that doesn't. Our second son just didn't sleep. It was an absolute nightmare. But you just have to adapt to it, and I'm not necessarily sure that these self-help books help. I think it puts too much pressure on a mum to be the perfect mum.
And I remember one of my daughters was breastfed, the other one was bottle fed because, as you say, they didn't react in the same way. But I remember the first time of buying formula feed, whatever it came in like a can. Went through the checkout. SMA, not CMA. They're a recruitment agency. But I almost expected them. Back in the day, if you were buying a bottle of wine and you were the checkout operator was under 18, they used to have to hold it up and go, wine, and the whole of the supermarket could see this alcohol. You're like, oh God. But I thought they were going to do the same with the formula feed. I honestly thought they were going to go, look at this, Mum.
She's not breastfeeding.
Yeah, exactly. So any final words of wisdom or encouragement, any top tips for our audience that you'd like to share?
I just think that, you need to own your career. And if you really want to go and do, first of all, go and do something you really want to do. Mm-hmm. I was just very lucky that I stumbled into accountancy, and it happens to have been the best choice I've ever done. Everything that I have, I owe to accountancy, because it's been a fantastic career. It's been very lucrative, and I've had a fantastic time. But you do make your own luck.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you want to go and do something like, I fancied doing radio programs, or I felt that I could help people on the radio doing with tax. And so I just, at that time, I contacted Radio Victory down in Portsmouth. Mm-hmm. And a guy called Chris Carnegie, who was head of Radio Victory, gave me a call and said, come down and we'll have a chat and do whatever. And I went down, and the first one I did was, it was just dreadful. And we recorded that, and then he got me back and he said, let's do it again and just talk as though you're just on a telephone call with a client. Mm-hmm. And just talk like that. And I did that, and it just came completely naturally, as you'd know, because you've done it as well. Okay. If you just do it that way. And so hence the reason why I did Radio Victory, and then I did another radio station down in Bournemouth, and then I was doing stuff with the BBC, both on TV and on radio. And it was just something I always wanted to do, and so go and do it. It's like, the adventures that I've done. If you can, go and do it. Life isn't going to come to you. You have to go and do it.
What a great way to end the podcast. Well, as you know, if you've watched our podcast, though, we don't end the podcast on life, as you say, what you make of it. We end it on an audience-sourced question. And in this envelope, we have the question for you, Nick.
Oh, wow. Audience-sourced question. If you could be any age for the rest of your life, which would you choose? Oh, cripes. That's interesting. I think probably mid to late 20s, because you've just qualified, because I qualified when I was, 23. So you've just qualified, so you've got a bit of money. And probably mid 20s.
And it's the excitement of starting out in life.
Yeah, exactly.
Suddenly you're an adult, I think. Obviously you turn 18, you become an adult, but you don't really become an adult quite at that point, do you?
No, and I think being mid 20s now, because as I said earlier, when I was sort of growing up, it was you left school, you got a qualification, you qualified, you bought a house, you got married, you had children. It was very much... Yeah. And life isn't like that anymore. The gap years weren't even heard of when I left school. Yeah. There's the ability to career swap. There's the ability to stop your career, go and travel, then come back to your career. There's just so many choices now. And I think if I went back to that age, I'd probably do that more, because I do love travelling and things like that.
Although I'm sure everyone who's listening to this will agree, what you've described in terms of your various travel journeys and where you've been, and your Chinas and your, Tanzanias and your Hong Kongs and whatever, we'll think, actually, you've had a pretty amazing career, amazing life anyway.
And I've been very lucky, because I've got an incredibly tolerant wife who doesn't mind me going off and doing these things. So, I'm very, very fortunate.
So let's end on that. Let's hear it for Jan.
Yes, hear it for Jan.
Thank you so much for your time today, Nick. It's been a pleasure.
No, not at all. I've loved it. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for today's episode. I hope you found it insightful and empowering. To stay connected, why not hit the subscribe button? Or if you think your friends might be interested, why not rate us as a 5? To be first to know about upcoming episodes, follow us on Facebook, TikTok, Instagram and LinkedIn, where you'll find us at Warner Goodman LLP. Or follow us on YouTube, where our episodes are at Piece of Pod. Thank you again. Until next time.